How are we doing, pirates? It's the end of the semester, and we are close to the end of our journey that we started off in the beginning of the semester, where I really wanted to introduce you to new school selling, consultative selling, problem-solving selling. Okay. Now, multiple times this semester, we talked about the two most important chapters are Chapter 8 and Chapter 9, Overcoming Objections and Closing Techniques. And regardless of whether you go into a sales career or not, these two topic areas are the most nugget worthy when it comes to life after Seton Hall. So this is all about being a bonus lecture, giving you a deck, a conversation, a major takeaway for you to have with you in your life after Seton Hall. So let's review. What are objections, or what is an objection? Well, good salespeople consider objections as a challenge, right? Nobody wants to be taken advantage of, and we learn to overcome objections regardless of what circumstances we're in. That's what's probably going to define us in our careers. How did we find a way over or around walls that were presented in front of us? So, an objection is an opposition or resistance to some kind of information that we are presenting. Now, they can object at any time during the sales call, and you're going to hear me say it multiple times that it's very important to deal with the objection as they arrive. You need to always be ready to handle when the objections come up. And we should do it as quickly as we possibly can. We also should plan for objections, because we as professionals know certain objections are going to come up more frequently. We plan for them. We anticipate them. We never forestall. We never put them off, because if we try to postpone them or forestall them, it will really shut someone down. They'll stop listening to you. And if you say something along the, hey, if you give me 5 minutes, I'm going to get to that in my point of the presentation, and I promise I will they're not going to even wait 5 minutes. You could have blown the entire conversation right then and there. You need to understand that objections are going to arise, and you need to handle them as they arise. And of course, you're not going to get defensive. You're always going to be positive. You're always going to be helpful. And you absolutely positively have to listen. You have to hear what they are, because the last thing you want to do is to answer an objection that they didn't ask, because you thought they were asking A and they were really asking B. So, part of this conversation here is we need to understand the types and varieties of objections that may arise. Sometimes an objection is nothing more than a request for more information because they didn't quite understand something in your presentation or in your persuasive content, and they're trying to get a clarification. Sometimes an objection is a condition of sale or a point of negotiation. Now, objections can be major or minor. We're going to talk about the difference between them both. Or they can be practical or psychological, and we're going to talk about the difference between the both. A real objection is overt or practical. And the salesperson must do their best to overcome hidden objections or psychological objections, because these are very challenging to deal with. All right, so here we go. Let's look at this graphically. If an objection arises, a prospect's response could be a request for more information, as we discussed, a condition for sale, which is a point for negotiation. Sometimes there's a hopeless objection. There's nothing you can do about it because it's something that you don't offer. It's something that you cannot solve. Sometimes there is a true objection, okay, which is something you would like to deal with, but you may or may not be able to. Hopeless is just something like, okay, I'm only going to talk to people who speak Martian. Okay, they're just trying to get you out of the office, and they're throwing you a curveball that they know it's impossible to hit. A true objection is something you can actually quantify, i.e., you're not ISO 9001 certified to be able to export to Europe. Well, that's a true objection. All right, major and minor, practical and psychological. Okay, we're going to talk about the difference between, minor are smaller deals, major are really big deals. Practical objections are overt, and sometimes we have psychological. Let's look at the difference between those types. A practical or overt objection. Price is overt. I know on the slide it said tangible, but I like the word overt better. Price is something practical, overt. No need for your product. The prospect has an overstock of competition. These are overt objections. Delivery schedules that you can't deliver when they really need something. Psychological are harder to uncover. It's harder to understand the meaning to why they're objecting. Like the resistance to spending money, the resistance to being dominated, some predetermined beliefs about your company or your brand or the product class, or maybe the salesperson that was there before you calling on this account. Maybe that individual does not like making decisions and they hold off and forestall and hold off or forestall. Or he or she doesn't want to stick their neck out and possibly get the company in trouble for spending money. These are psychological objections. These are much harder to work out. You have to do your best to figure out what the objection is. So here are 6 major categories or types of objections. We have hidden, stalling, the no need, money, product objections, and source objections. Let's go back to these real quick. So hidden are the psychological ones. You have to dig to see if you can uncover what the true objection is. Stalling is they're either trying to buy time or they don't want to make the decision. The no need objection is your fault as the salesperson because you should have learned about this in your pre-approach planning, or you should have figured this out earlier in your sales presentation before you got deeper in, and they were making this type of objection. Money objections are real, they're practical, they're overt, especially considering the times we're in right now. There may or may not be money around to be able to buy new product or new services. Product objections, i.e. your product does something or does not fit within their systems or their logistics or their product lines and it's not a good fit. And then finally, source objections. It could be the case your particular company or the people that came before you did not have a strong reputation until things were fixed. All right, finally, objection techniques. Now, we have 10 here on the screen. I'm going to tell you right now, not all 10 are very strong for new school selling. If we start with number 1, dodge. Okay, you never dodge an objection. We already talked about this in an earlier slide. This is a ridiculous technique. Never dodge an objection. You deal with them as they arise. You pass up the objection. No, you do not pass up the objection. You must deal with them as they arise. Rephrase the objection as a question. This is actually a very good technique. And this is a very good technique to clarify what the actual objection is. So someone says, your price is too high. And you rephrase the objection as a question to make sure that we're clear. What you're trying to say is, my price is too high. Is that correct? And then they say yes. This is a very good technique to clarify what the objection is, to get you to listen and to make sure that you are going to respond and deal with their actual objection. However, this technique does not help you overcome the objection. It's a good start, but you need to do more than just rephrase as a question. Number 4, ignore. You never postpone an objection. Number 5, boomerang. This is a very, very good technique. Boomerang turns an objection into a condition of sale. If they say, objection, your price is too high, and you turn that objection into a condition of sale, well, yes, my price is high, but if I lower 10% for you today, would you buy? That's the boomerang technique. That is a very good technique, providing, here's the condition, that this is the only objection that they have. Because if they have another objection, you just threw your boomerang and you got nothing left after that. We'll get back to boomerang because we're going to talk about trial closes in a bit. And you could use boomerang in the right scenario, and that's how you close. Asking questions. I think asking questions in a polite and respectful way is a very good technique for dealing with objections. I don't think asking questions in and of itself overcomes the objection. I think it helps you uncover what the psychological objection is. Denial, or direct denial, or disagreeing overtly. Your price is too high. I disagree with you. My price is not high. I think this is a lousy technique. Because the last thing you want to do is get defensive. The last thing you want to do is to draw a line in the sand and it be me versus them. And then all of a sudden we're in an argument. And as soon as you get into an argument as a salesperson, you have lost. You never win an argument. So direct denial is too old school, too confrontational for me to be comfortable with. Now, number 8, indirect denial. I am a huge fan of this particular technique because indirect denial agrees with everyone. Now, you can use a little reverse psychology and you then set the record straight after you agree with them. So the objection comes up, hey, your price is too high. And you say, I agree with you. My price is too high. Or you could say, I agree with you. Our price tends to be one of the highest in the industry. But then you set the record straight. Our price may be the highest in the industry, but our quality is 2x or 3x of anybody else in the industry. You're going to have to replace someone else's product at least 1.5 to 2.5 times more per how long our product lasts. So is our product really that much more expensive than everyone else in the industry? See, that indirect denial, without starting an argument, you agree with them, but in the process of explaining why you agree with them, you set the record straight. It's a very effective technique. Compensation, number 9, is a very effective technique. You could rephrase as a question, clarify what the objection is, and then if you know what the objection is, you can compensate in some way, shape, or form, either in logistics or shipping or price or promo dollars. You figure out what the compensation may be, but whatever the compensation may be, it is an excellent way to overcome an objection. And finally, third party. If someone has an objection, I don't know if you're really, I never heard of you. What's your quality like? And you don't have to vouch for yourself, but you can go to a third party source, either some trade magazine or some other kind of magazine or J.D. Powers or some kind of quality survey. You could use testimonials from existing customers to build trust and rapport. I don't think third party in and of itself it's a very good technique. I think you should use it in conjunction with another technique, just like rephrase as a question is a good technique, but in and of itself is not something you should use alone. Using third party and then going to compensation, or using third party and then doing indirect denial, or using indirect denial and then going to third party. Siri would like to talk to us. These are all the objection techniques. Some of them are quite good. Some of them you should not use. Regardless of which overcoming objection technique you use, you need feedback. You need a trial close. Not a closing technique, a trial close, because a trial close is nothing more than asking someone's opinion. Because you want to make sure that you in fact met or overcame their particular objection. And the only way for you to know if you overcame their objection is to ask for some feedback. We call that a trial close. I personally think you should trial close everyone all the time. You should always ask someone's opinion before you give your own. This is another way for participation from the audience. It's two-way communication from the people that you're presenting to. Like I said, use a trial close in normal everyday conversation. You can improve your communication. You can stimulate participation in a conversation. You can ask other people's opinion. It's a way to get other people engaged. Is that a good place to eat? It's a question. What did you think about the movie? It's a question. How does that sound to you? That is a wonderful trial close technique. So when do you need feedback? When should you ask someone's opinion? When should you trial close? You always trial close after making a strong selling point in your presentation. After you present everything, but before you close, you need to trial close, because you should ask their opinion and find out if there is any issues that you need to overcome before you go to close. Every time you're dealing with a specific objection, you should always trial close to make sure that you did in fact overcome that objection. And immediately before you go to close the sale, of course. You think about our FABs, feature advantage benefits. These are the strong selling points, right? We'll figure out whether if we have successfully answered an objection, whether any other objections remain, and the potential that your prospect is ready to close. Some examples of trial closes. Now, does that answer your question? With that question out of the way, can we move ahead? What do you think? If they say yes, there you go. You overcame the objection. Now, if we got through the objections, we need some kind of transition, a smooth transmission back to the conversation where we were at that point in the presentation, as we were discussing. And then we could potentially move to close the sale if we completed all the details we wanted to complete in our presentation. Right? So I'm going to show you a diagram of this in a second. If there is some kind of an issue that you cannot overcome, you have to admit that this is an issue. I mean, you're trying to build rapport here. Remember, a lot of people are not going to buy from you the first time, and it's all about building the relationship going forward. So 6 months from now, they're going to call you back. You're not trying to build a bridge here. That's why we're always staying positive. We don't need to get defensive. Is it possible for us to compensate? We're going to try. If we're not sure if the customer will not close, I don't know if you should necessarily close. I don't think you should always ask for the order. Remember, these are very old school. You could trial, close, and infer, but we're looking for those buying signals to see if they would actually buy. You allow them to say no. That I'll agree with. Now, what I won't agree with is never take no for an answer, or always be closing, or always trying to be pushy, because the last thing you want to do is make them uncomfortable after you just spent all that time building rapport. We're not going to be pushy. We're going to leave the door open for a return visit. We're not going to burn a bridge. So here's that flow chart I was just referring to. So an objection arises during your presentation. There's some kind of either practical, psychological, major, minor. There is an objection. You use some techniques to overcome the objection. You rephrase as a question to clarify. You ask some questions. You compensate or indirect denial. And then after you use a objection technique, you then trial close, because you need the feedback. You want to know where you're at. Did I in fact overcome that objection? And if you did, and the trial close gave you the feedback that you did overcome that particular objection, you can either move on back into your presentation from where you reverted out, because you deal with the objections as they arise. Or if you're done with your presentation and there is no other objections and you trial closed and you have positive feedback, well, okay, then you go and close and use a closing technique. Now, speaking of closing techniques, overcoming objections is a really big deal. But using sound, new school closing techniques is also a really big deal. Overcoming objections and closing are two of the most valuable things that we talked about all semester. Now, I like how this conversation starts, by the golden rule: do unto others as others do to you. You're looking for buying signals. You should be confident because you're trying to be helpful, and you should suggest that they should do what's in their own best interest. You're thinking about WIIFM, what's in it for me. Granted, you're thinking about it from their perspective. If there's something in it for them, they will care. If there's nothing in it for them, then you didn't do a good enough job as a salesperson. We will have several closes for each call. We do not take the no personally, because we're trying to build a relationship, and a no now doesn't mean no forever. We're not burning bridges. This is the start of things, whether they buy or not buy this particular time. So there is this, when should I try to close? I really love this definition that we see on the screen here. Closing is the process of helping people make a decision that will benefit them. This is a brilliant, new school, WIIFM way of thinking about what closing is. I should close when I know I'm being helpful. I should close when I can easily recommend that this is in your own best interest. You should do this because you will be better off if you do this. And I feel very comfortable saying that with no self-interest whatsoever. There are no magical phrases. There are some techniques. There's techniques. We're going to talk about some techniques. It's really difficult to know when they're in the conviction stage other than you trial closing them and finding out where their head's at, because if you ask their opinion, you get that feedback to see, are they ready or are they not ready? So that's the whole idea here. You close when they're ready. You don't close at the end of your presentation if they're ready earlier. You're looking for those verbal and nonverbal buying signals. You're looking for the verbal feedback and the nonverbal feedback. They need to tell you that they're ready. You are not going to force the issue here. So, a buying signal is anything that a prospect says or does to indicate that they're ready. Them asking questions is a good thing. Them asking another person's opinion in the room is a good thing. If they're relaxed, if they're friendly, if they have open body language, if they're not judging you or trying to take you down or being argumentative. Look, I was either indirectly in sales or tangentially related to sales for a number of years prior to going back into academia or going into academia. No one ever pulled out a purchase order form in any of the situations I've ever been in. No. If they're very thoughtful and they're carefully examining the merchandise, that they're really thinking about it. What makes someone a good closer? Well, someone who listens and pays attention. Someone who asks for the order, who they did a really good job during the presentation, dealing with objections, overcoming objections, trial closing. And then if you use a closing technique and you know that it's in their own best interest based on the conversation that you had in the last X number of minutes, well, you're done. You asked for the order, and then you let them decide. You're done. The last thing you want to do as a salesperson is talk over it and keep talking. You could say something that changed their mind. You already got them to a point where it's in their own best interest. If you are successful, you thank them, you take the order, and then they're a busy executive. He or she has other things to do. You get out of their hair. And then you do what good salespeople do, which is service and follow-up after to help build the relationship going forward. How many times should you close? All right. This is a conversation that we have in class all the time. It's very, very old school to never take no for an answer. I have a hard time with that ABC, always be closing, because you can easily blow a relationship by being too pushy and making someone uncomfortable. Now, a lot of times we talk about 3 closes or 3 different closing techniques or closing around 3 different ways. I don't think 3 is the minimum. I think 3 is the maximum. 1 hard no, you should be done. Because it's not about this time, it's about all time. I'm very much into a CRM, customer relationship management, which is powered by CLV, customer lifetime value. And you don't want to be pushy here. You don't want to blow the relationship now after you just spent all that time building rapport. Look, it's even here on the slides. I don't agree with this. I already told you that I don't agree with this. All right, let's talk about techniques. We have a bunch of them on the screen again. Some of these are quite good. Some of these are very old school, and I'm not a fan. Let's start off with the assumptive close right up here. Not a fan. Very old school. We make an ass out of you and me if it was assume. Okay. I'm going to assume that you're going to buy. And you're just like, oh, thank you very much for your time. I'll put that order in and, I'll talk to you again on Monday. No. This is really old school. You could really turn someone off all the way at the end and blow it at the end by assuming and being pushy then. No. Do not use the assumptive close. The compliment close. Okay? There's nothing wrong with a compliment. And if we're talking about 3 closing techniques, and this would be considered a closing technique, sure, you should lead off with a compliment. I really enjoyed our time today. There's no question that this company is on the forefront. You say a lot of nice things right there on the up front. But a compliment in and of itself is not a closing technique. I think it's a setup in a good way. It's a lead-in, okay? But it's not a closing technique. The summary of benefits technique is spectacular. It's very new school. I could not recommend it more. So let's pretend you're in a presentation and you're going to talk about 10 things. And over the course of a 25-minute conversation, it becomes abundantly obvious that number 2, number 5, and number 9 were the 3 items that were the most wow, the most significant, the most WIIFM for them. So the objections come up. You use your overcoming objection techniques. You trial close, and then there isn't anything else to trial close based on the feedback. Well, based on number 2 that we talked about, and number 5 that we talked about, and number 9 that we talked about, I suggest you buy. It is like a perfect way to summarize all the things that are most important to them, and then you close. I suggest you buy, because it's in their own best interest. The continuous yes close is very old school. It's what a lot of telemarketers do. They get you to answer yes to a number of easy questions, and then they throw the close in, like in question number 5 or 6, and you get into this pattern of continually saying yes. All of a sudden you said yes to something that you didn't really think all that much about. And there is some psychological theory behind once you say yes, you kind of make a commitment, and once you make a commitment, you're probably going to follow through. I am not a fan of this technique. It is very old school. It's sneaky. There's no reason to go there. It's the same reason why there's no reason to go to an assumptive close. Too old school for me. No. Now, the minor points close or the T account close are 2 good closing techniques when your prospect is undecided, or a situation where there is a lot of permutations or options and you need to kind of work through with them. Like they're interested in buying, but they need to work out all the final details. So the T account version of this is pros and cons, and the minor points version of this is you start with smaller item things that's easy to deal with, and you work your way to the bigger, more difficult things. After we settled some low-hanging fruit, let's get to the more difficult conversation. I think that minor points and T account are very good techniques to use when your prospect is undecided, and then after this, you go to a summary of benefits. I mean, you're being helpful here. You're working with them. And then you go to a summary of benefits. The standing room only close is classic persuasion 101. There's nothing wrong with this. It is not unethical. Okay? This is straight up one of the 6 weapons of influence right out of Cialdini called scarcity. As long as the scarcity exists and you're not faking scarcity, there's nothing wrong with the standing room only close. As long as you're being truthful, the standing room only close is a very effective close. The probability close, not so good. So, given that where we're at, what's the probability you're going to buy from me today? This is ridiculous, because the question is really binary. It's either 100% or 0. Because when someone says 85%, what do you do with that? If someone says 95%, what do you do with that? It's either 100% or 0. So asking someone with a probability, no. Negotiation is a very good closing technique. This is similar to when we were talking about overcoming objections and we compensate. Whether we call it compensation, whether we call it negotiation, this is a wonderful way to close and be helpful at the same time. I have no idea what a technology close is, using technology to help you close. Okay, this is a PowerPoint deck. This is Camtasia. This is a Bluetooth microphone. This is a Blue microphone. Yeah, of course we use technology. But technology in and of itself is not a closing technique. The alternative choice close. I have a hard time with this one because the alternative choice close is very sneaky. It's probably too old school for me. I don't think you need to go there anymore, especially when there's other stronger, more relationship building techniques. But the alternative choice close goes along something like this, Objection, overcoming objection technique, trial close, there's no more objections. So what would you rather have, the bubble mint or the winter mint? So I'm giving you a choice here. But the sneaky part of this is I'm giving you a choice between 2 buying options. Not buying and not buying. It's buy and buy. That's kind of old school. You feel good that you're making a choice, but the salesperson's like, yeah, you're making a choice between 2 buying decisions and I win no matter what. Yeah, I don't think we need to use this technique anymore. This is very old school. I'm not a fan of this. I'm not a fan of assumptive. I'm not a fan of the continuous yes, because these are old school selling techniques in that always be closing, never take no for an answer mentality. We have other techniques we can use to be helpful in a new school selling environment. All right, folks. All right, pirates. We are good. I know you're probably going to sell your textbook back. It's worth a lot of money, but I wanted to create this for you as something to think about, or have a nugget deck or a nugget conversation or something to have going forward for your life after Seton Hall. Outside of that, I am good. You know how to find me if you have any questions. Go Pirates!